Hey, no problem. Hello and welcome everyone to Art School Live. My name is Mandy Theis and I will be your guest host today for Eric Rhodes. And you're going to get a twofer today because I'm also going to be giving the demo today. And today we are going to talk about the most common color myths and how to spot them.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rhodes. Now, here's your host, Eric Rhodes.
So for clarity, I am not in fact Eric Rhodes. My name is Mandy Theis, and I am substituting for Eric while he's off on one of his art adventures this week. So my name is Mandy Theis. I am the director of the School of Atelier Arts. And today I have such a good lesson that I'm so excited to share with you. So while Eric is away, we have a very fun week planned for you. But today I get to kick it off. And I wanted to talk about color myths, color lies, color rules that we hear in painting, and when and like how to spot them and are they true or not. So we're going to put some of these color myths to the test, some of these ideas, some of these rules to the test today. And we're going to determine whether they're always rules, if they're sometimes rules, or if they're kind of like shouldn't be rules at all. So we're going to have a lot of fun today. I'd like to give a shout out. I was streaming this morning on the School of Atelier Arts channel, and a great conversation popped up about these types of color myths. And I was like, you know what? I should do a whole class on this. So I'm really excited to share some of the most common color myths with you today. Please make sure to say hello in the chat. I love hearing from everybody. Welcome, everyone. We have people from Nevada. We have all sorts of people showing up here today. Just a heads up, Amandine, it looks like there might be some trouble on the other page. People are saying that the stream is maybe a little iffy there. Okay, so without further ado, first of all, in the chat, please let me know what are some of the color myths that you have heard or color ideas. So one of the ones that came up when I was streaming this morning is, oh, but Mandy, aren't shadows always supposed to be warm and the light's always supposed to be cold? Or the reverse if you're working from artificial light. So that's the color myth, right? Or is it a myth? Maybe it's always true. We're going to explore that today. So let me know what some of the other color ideas that you've heard. My background's in K-12 art education, and something that I see a lot in K-12 art circles and art teacher circles is, oh, warm colors are red, orange, yellow, and cool colors are green, blue, purple. But is that true? That's another one we're going to explore today. Okay. Oh, so good to see so many people. All right. So I'm going to keep an eye out for your color ideas. But meanwhile, we're going to start tackling a few of these concepts today. So the first one I want to talk about is shadows should be warm and light should be cold. And so let's take a look at a few examples here. So this is a master copy of a Velázquez painting. This is one that we've been working on and streaming at the School of Atelier Arts. But I think it's such a great example of we have a clear shadow and we have a clear light here. But look how orange and hot. I mean, this is almost fire in this shadow, right? We have a very, very warm shadow. But we also have a very orangey and a very, very warm light. So if we had made the shadow cool, like with blue undertones, it wouldn't look nearly as believable as a human head, right? This particular skin tone has a deep orange undercurrent to it, and that's going to show up in the shadow as well as in the light. So if we follow a formula, like if this person was sitting in front of us and we were following a formula and being like, oh, well, my shadows have to be cold because that's the rule, we would be missing out on what our eyes are actually seeing. So I want to caution everybody today about these rules. Sometimes these rules evolve because they can often be true, but if you take them at face value as, oh, this has to be true, you're overriding your sight, you're overriding your vision, and you don't want to do that. I believe in looking first and then using, art philosophies to help you look better and look again, right? So something that's really common in the atelier world is something called using your fresh eye, right? And there's ways we can make our eye feel fresh, like we do when we first look at our painting. We can turn our paintings upside down, right? But if we go in with the assumption that these shadows have to be cold, right, we're going to miss out on actually observing them. We're not going to have fresh eyes. We're going to have polluted eyes, polluted by assumptions that are not necessarily true. Oh, okay. So this is one example of that. And, I have another example here that might be a little bit more traditional. We have a slightly warmer shadow here and slightly cooler lights, but the lights are cooler because the local color here is cool. So we have this cool blue in this 𝗖𝗵𝗍𝗆 painting. And, we have some light here. But if we look at the light on the bird, the local color of the bird is warm and dark in value. So even though this is in the light, right, our light source is kind of coming up this way, even though this is in the light, it's warm because the local color is warm. And that's very similar to what we're experiencing here. The local color is warm. So even though this is in shadow, it may be tiny bit cooler than some of the areas up here, but there's also some cool points up here, right? Like this is a very cold white on the very top of the forehead here, right? So we can't just assume that everything is warm or everything is cool. We need to use our eyes. Here we have warm light, here we have cold light, because it made sense even within one light plane, the face of the plane that's in the light, to have both cool here and warm here. So this idea that we have these rules, any sort of rule should be taken with a grain of salt and under the assumption, look first and then apply the rule second. Okay, another little color idea today that I want to talk about is from, where's my palette? Oh, here we go. Okay, let's mix a few colors here. All right, so one of the rules that often gets thrown around a lot in painting is you can mix any color with red, yellow, and blue. So I have red, yellow, and blue on my palette, and we're going to attempt to mix a couple different colors here, and we're going to test how true this is. All right. Now, I'm going to start by matching just a color here. And since we were talking about this warm skin tone, I'm going to mix a warm skin tone here, right? So this is basically a dark orange that has a fair amount of chroma in it. When colors get dark, people seem to have a harder time seeing the chroma in a dark color. But I really encourage you, there's nothing worse than an inky, dead, dark shadow that just feels like it's going to suck your soul out, right? Because we didn't get the chroma, we didn't get the color in the shadow. So what I want to do is make sure that we have something called a chromatic dark. All right. So a lot of people know how to make dark, but they stop seeing chroma when it gets really dark. The same thing happens when things get light. People tend to stop seeing the chroma in really light values. So what I'm going to do is going to mix this color, and let's see if we can mix it with just our red, our yellow, and our blue. So what I'm going to do first is make an orange color. And then I am going to neutralize it slightly by adding some blue, right? Because this isn't a pure orange note on the shadow. It's neutralized, and the blue will do two things that will help us. One, it will darken it because blue is darker in value, and two, it will neutralize it. I see a comment in the chat that I love simplicity, like taking it back to just 3 colors. And it's true. Sometimes when we limit our paints, especially our pigments, we can begin to really explore what they're truly capable of, right? Okay, so we have a neutralized orange now. Now the problem here, so we only have red, yellow, and blue. Those are the only colors we've used. But do you see how even though I'm getting close, that my value is too light? So I need a darker value. So this is one limitation of a red, yellow, blue palette. Can you mix any color? Well, without using my black, my blue just isn't going to get me quite dark enough without turning it super green, because the blue is really chromatic, the black is more neutral. So the black will actually darken and neutralize. The blue will darken and skew it more blue, right? Technically, our black is a very dark blue, but it's in dark neutralized blue. So our first limitation is getting a full value range out of red, yellow, blue, because unless we're using a pure blue right out of the tube, we're not going to be able to get things that value, right, to get it dark enough in value. So this is our first limitation, is red, yellow, and blue is limiting our value range. So if I add black into it, it looks like I need to add a little more red. The black's turning it to green as well. All right, so remember, we want something that's both warm and dark. And now we have something that's much closer in value here. And you can see, do you see how when I put my palette knife up, it disappears into the color I'm mixing behind it? All right. So we're going to talk about this too, but our first limitation of using red, yellow, blue is a value limitation. All right. Now, I want to put something up here because I found this great color in the checkout stand here. This great hot pink color, right? So let's see what other limitations this palette might have. So if I want to mix this pink color, can anybody tell me in the chat, how am I going to mix pink, right? What colors make pink? And I know that some of you know this, don't be shy. For those of you who stream with me on the 𝗠𝘆𝗵𝘀 Atelier Arts channel, you know that I really believe in active learning, right? So when we are watching somebody that's passive learning, right? And my background is in education, I'm a licensed teacher. And what happens is even when you give a single response, even when you commit to a guess in the chat, you actually will learn more. We know this, like we have plenty of studies that prove this. So being like participating in your learning, actually like typing in your guesses in the chat, you will walk away with more knowledge than the passive kind of, watching, because it's giving you an opportunity to actually practice your skills in a more active way. Okay, so I'm seeing lots of great answers here in the chat. How am I going to make pink, red, and white? So I'm going to pull some of my white, which technically white isn't my yellow, red, blue either. So already we have a value limitation. So I have some white over here, and I'm just going to put a little bit of red in it. All right, so we're starting to get our pink. We have our red and our white. All right, but when I hold up this color here, right, is this the same color? I mean, it's kind of in the ballpark. It maybe is a little bit too light. Maybe I need a little bit more red in there because the value is a little bit light. So let's add a little bit more red. All right, so let's at least match the value with our pink. Okay, so we have a much more similar value here, but do you see how this pink is not the same as this pink? For one, this pink, the hue is a little bit warmer. It's a warmer pink, and this is a colder pink. So if I want to cool down my pink, I could add just a tiny bit of blue to make my pink colder, right? Because this is more of a purpley pink and this is more of an orangey pink, all right? So I'm going to add the tiniest bit of blue to cool it down. This is called a hue change. Okay, so we are tipping the hue so that our pink is just a little bit colder. All right, but that still is not the right color. It's nowhere near the right color of this intensity, right? So what I could do is add yellow, right? Yellow's really bright. So what if I, instead of adding blue to cool down my pink, I go for making it feel brighter. So let me mix a new pink here with red. And then I'll mix some yellow into it. All right, so this is just the red. Let's mix a little bit of yellow in here. It'll make it feel brighter, right? So we get the feeling of brightness because we have a more highly chromatic pigment. But this is an orangey pink, and it's still nowhere near as bright as this, all right? And this is a really, really important thing to know and to learn about mixing your colors. You can't mix any color to be more chromatic than what you start with, all right? So we have this red, yellow, and blue, but this pink is a super neon pink. It is way more chromatic than anything else on our palette. There's no way we can mix a color to be more chromatic than it is. In fact, the only way to paint this would be to have this pigment. But here's where things start to get really confusing for artists, okay? So, and please pay very careful attention to this, all right? We have limitations. We actually have scientific limitations. We do not actually have a pink pigment in oil paint that is this chromatic. We have some that are close. We have some quinacridone roses, but we in oil paint do not have this. Well, if we don't have this pigment, how could it be printed here? So something to know about is that the technology for inks and the technology for dyes on clothes is actually far more ahead technologically than the physical pigments we have to make paint with, right? So you can get clothing this color, you can print this color, but as of right now, we actually don't have the ground pigment of this color. Now, someday we probably can. The makeup industry, the car industry, they keep expanding the chroma levels available to us as artists. But knowing what the limitations of oil painting are is really helpful. Now, here's a neat trick. Let's say, okay, I can't actually get this color. I have something kind of close. I've mixed up the closest thing. Ellen says, that's not fair. I agree. Right? Like, come on, why is the the clothing industry so far ahead? So I encourage you all to advocate our pigment scientists, our pigment chemists, to give us some nice quinacridone, and really expand our chroma range for our pigments. Now, that being said, compared to the old masters, right, we have an incredible chroma range. Like, look at this by comparison, okay? Traditionally, the yellow that a lot of the old masters painted with was yellow ochre, right? Look how neutral this yellow ochre is compared to the chroma that we have when cadmiums were invented in the mid-1800s, right? Like, what an amazing invention. Like, people think that Impressionism came because people were fighting against the Academy. No, Impressionism came about in large part because of the scientific discoveries of cadmiums, the scientific discovery of tubing paint. Before then, they would just mix fresh paint in the studio and it wasn't very transportable. It was a technological advancement that allowed people to be outside, and a color range that previously, like, look at this, right? Of course, they went outside and wanted to paint the color exactly the way they thought. Before then, the closest they could do would be matching the value, which is essentially what we did here, right? This pink is not an accurate pink, but it matches the value. And that's what artists had until these cadmiums were invented. And now in our modern era, we have quinacridones. How freaking cool is it to be alive today when our pigment range is so much greater? But that being said, there are things you can do even with this unfair advantage, when printed inks are ahead of where we are in oil painting. And it's what the old masters did. How did the old masters make something look this pink when they didn't have those pink colors? Well, they used something called color relationships, okay? So if I were to, let me get a scrap canvas here. Actually, I'm just going to paint up here on this board because this is wet from my demo earlier this morning on the 𝗠𝘆𝘁𝗵𝘀 channel. Okay. And this is great. Look how bright this looks. And let me tilt you guys up so you can see it. Look how bright this looks simply because it's surrounded by something black. Now, is it the same as this, which is also imprinted black? No, but we can get an effect, a color effect, by darkening what's around it. In fact, if I put some pure black, it'll probably read darker than just the black board that it's on. So that should be reading a little blacker. Do you see how it looks even brighter now? Just because the relationship between what's around it. And that was a trick that the old masters used all the time. If they wanted something to feel shiny, like a shiny gold, right? And the best they had was the yellow ochre, they'd put their yellow ochre down, but then exaggerate the darks because they had the pigment to go dark. Okay, I see I'm blowing some minds here today. I'm so glad that you guys are interested in this. There's so much about color that is known, but sometimes we just need to organize that information in a way that makes sense. That's what I try to do with the color theory worksheets that I sell at the School of Atelier Arts. It's like trying to organize massive amounts of color information in a way that makes sense, and understanding what are the limitations of your pigments, because I have students that will spend days trying to mix this color and not understanding that it's not actually possible with the pigments that they have on their palette. Okay, so understanding what your pigments can do and can't do. But a general rule is that you can't make anything more chromatic than what's on your palette. And this is far more chromatic than any of the pigments that I've been able to lay out on my palette. You're so sweet, Elaine, saying we need a whole week of Mandy. Well, you're going to get me every day, but you're also going to get the bonus of getting to see all these other amazing artists. I love interviewing these other artists, and I love asking them what their ideas about color are, right? Because atelier training at its core is really this collected body of knowledge. Like, you don't have to spend 10 years in isolation in your studio to, learn something that you could have learned in 1 minute from an atelier trained artist, right? People ask me, oh, is atelier training really worth it? And I'm like, well, would you rather have 20 years of frustrating, grinding, not sure what you're doing painting, or would you rather get the skill set under your belt and go off and make the art that's important to you? Like, that's what atelier training will give you, Okay, so I made some notes. So our color lies so far, can we mix any color from red, yellow, and blue? No, we can't. The answer is no. Our palette, we can only mix colors that we have pigments for, and our pigments are very limited. Our eyes can see lighter lights, darker darks, and more chromas than we have the pigments for. If there's a window above me. If I try to paint that, actually, I'm going to, let's see if I can turn you up to see this light. All right, I'm going to show you this light here. All right, look how bright that is, right? And it's coming through your screens at home. That's really light. Now, I want you to see how dark my titanium white is by comparison, right? Do you see look how dark that white is compared to the window. Look how dark it is, okay? So I don't have a white to paint that light. It doesn't exist. We don't have a white that's that bright. What we do have is the ability to put something really light on top of something dark to give the illusion of brightness, right? So, sorry. So this looks really bright because we have something around it darker. So we can exaggerate and purposely darken what's around. If we wanted to paint a window, we can intentionally darken what's around it so that it feels as bright. That's called relational color, okay? That's different from sight size color, right? Because if I'm trying to sight size it, I'm going to keep taking this white paint and holding it up to my window and being like, oh, it's not right, right? And I might sight size the color of, the surrounding of the window, but my end painting is not going to feel like a bright light because I'm sight sizing the color that I can match, and I don't actually have the lightness of the light, okay? I know I'm getting into like a really geeky color situation here, and I please don't hesitate to let me know if I'm losing you. But sight size color is matching it exactly as we see it. But how can we sight size a window? We can't. We don't have the pigment. We can't sight size that color. We can only recreate the relationships. Okay. I'm like really on my high horse today with color. Okay. So, yeah, so I see a note in the chat, like, thank you for like letting me know that some colors aren't mixable. I make myself crazy sometimes. Now, that being said, don't give up trying to match certain colors, especially if it's in a middle value range. Sometimes, like this is a painting I'm working on in the online atelier where I teach students, I run a full atelier online, and we're working on this project right now. And neutrals are also really, really hard for a lot of students to paint. Because they require like a really nuanced, like just adding a tiny bit too much blue or a tiny bit too much red will throw your neutral off, okay? So this is the underpainting that we did here for this project. But some students, it will take you a lot of time. You will have to grapple with neutrals before you get them because they're really small increments of change to get the right neutral, but you do have the pigments to get a neutral. So just because the color is hard to match doesn't mean it's impossible, But if a color is more chromatic than what you have on your palette, it is impossible. You just can't make something more chromatic. So I see a question in the chat about which CADs I'm using today. I think this is what's called CAD yellow, but it's a touch on the cool side. I wish it was just a little bit warmer. Depending on what brand you buy your CAD yellows from, it can be orange to green, right? So I hesitate to say, oh, buy CAD yellow light or CAD medium because it depends on the brand. I am not loyal to any specific brand. I have my favorite pigments from each brand, but actually on the School of Atelier Arts website, I just posted a blog post on materials called oil painting materials. So if you go to our website and just put the search in for that blog post will come up, and it gives you like the specifics of the materials I use. But I know this is a CAD yellow. This is a CAD red medium. Some CAD red mediums are really cold. This particular CAD red medium is orangier the way I like it. Okay, you guys are so sweet in the chat. I really love teaching. You know, I love painting and I love teaching. Those are my two favorite things. So I'm glad that I have such good students to learn with me today. All right, so we've only gotten through like one color myth. You can't mix every color. Red, yellow, blue will not make you every color. All right, the next color myth I want to talk about is, has anybody heard this one, that red, orange, yellow are warm colors and green, blue, purple are cold colors? Has anybody heard that before? Because I'm hoping if that's something you've heard before, that I can really broaden your mind here. And I hope this is like a holy cow moment for some of you. Okay, so we've heard it. Okay, here's the thing. Saying that colors are warm and cool are all relative. And what I mean by that, let me put this paintbrush down. What I mean by that is, actually, let me clear my palette just so that we have some clean space. All right. I'm just going to put some yellow into this reddish pile here, and we're going to make some orange. Okay. And then I'm going to make a second orange over here. All right. So orange is supposed to be a warm color, right? But this is orange and this is orange, but this orange is warmer than this orange, right? This is like a pinky orange and this is more of a yellowy orange, right? So it only matters what's next to it. You could even make an argument that this is a yellow. And if I put pure yellow next to it, sorry, I got a little dirty. Let's pretend that's pure yellow. Okay, I could, in theory, call both of these yellows, but this would be a warm yellow and this would be a cold yellow, unless I take some of this yellow and put a teensy bit of blue in it. I'm going to put enough in that it's obvious for the demo here. That was too much, sorry. My yellow pile is getting dirty. Okay, so this is a yellow. And this is a yellow, but this is a greenish yellow, and this is a less green yellow. All of a sudden, this is a cold yellow, and this is a warm yellow, even though when we compare this to this, that this is the cold yellow. Did I mess that up? I always get confused if it's being yellower is warmer or redder. So this is warm compared to this, or sorry, this yellow is warm compared to this one, but it's also warm compared to this one. Why does that make sense? I'm messing something up in my head and I don't know what it is. This is a green yellow is a cold yellow. I guess the problem is that this is really more of an orange. So let's compare this to a different orange. I've been like ranting about this all morning and now I'm getting lost in my own head. All right, so instead of considering this a yellow, we'll consider this an orange. And we'll also make this an orange over here. I'm just going to steal some of this. Right, so, you know, it's all relative to each other, which one is warmer and which one is cooler. So every color is both warmer and cool. I mean, this is an orange and this is an orange, but this is a colder orange than this orange on the forehead, right? That's what helps us make a shift in hue. So warm and cool colors are really just talking about the shift of hue. Is it an orangey or yellow? Is it a green or yellow, right? It's just a way to describe to compare two colors, and it only works in comparison. The colors themselves are not inherently warm or cool. They're only warm or cool compared to something else. Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up on the chat. So I love how active the chat is. I love it. But there are warms and cools within the comparison of another color next to it. Exactly, Kathleen. So we're getting the comparison, right? So far we've learned that red, yellow, blue will not mix every color we need. That our colors have limitations, that we can't just mix every color, that there are colors outside of our pigment range. There are colors outside of our value range, both too light and too dark. We've learned that there's no such thing as warm and cool colors, as far as saying, oh, all reds, oranges, and yellows are warm, because every red, orange, and yellow can be both warm and cool. Okay. So, and we also talked about, we also talked a little bit about what we call site size color, right? That as we were talking about the limitations of red, yellow, and blue on our palette, that because our eyes can see more colors and more lights and more darks, that if we just try to match everything physically, if we're mixing colors and putting them up in front of what we see, that only works until we come into colors that we don't have the pigment for, right? So site size color is when you're trying to match exactly what you see. Relational color is when you're recreating the relationships that you see. So relational color is what we did up here. We wanted the pink to feel brighter, so we put it next to something darker, right? So this is relational color. And we can do that. We can do values relational. You know, when we wanted to think about our window, we put the lightest light that we had on our palette next to one of the darkest things we have on our palette to recreate the value jump that I see when I look at this window. Because what's surrounding that window is not this dark, right? It's much lighter than this. But if I want to recreate the relationship, it needs to be much darker. So I have to choose between the relationship between the light and shadow, or getting the wall color. In fact, I'll mix the wall color right now as I see it. So it's kind of a neutralized green color, middle value. Okay, this is actually a pretty close match to what the wall color looks like. So if I were to site size this and hold it up, this is the color, right? But if I put this next to my window, do you see how this value change is much smaller? So I can either site size the color and just accept the fact that my white isn't bright enough, or I can intentionally darken the color, like having it black here, and get the value jump that I'm seeing. So this is relational color, this is site size color. But this is why artists are not cameras. You know, it's often an insult to tell an atelier trained artist, oh, your paintings look just like a photograph. Like they'll look at this drapery and be like, oh, it looks just like a photograph. But, you know, our eyes, we have two eyes. We are seeing in 3D. We are seeing massive amounts of visual information, and we have to edit it to a 2D surface. For anybody who's ever worked in like computer modeling, you know, how much more data does it take up? You know, how much more space does it take up to model something in 3D than 2D? Because you're editing out massive amounts of information, okay? And a camera is editing that information out the way a camera does. But as a painter, you're a human, and you have all sorts of choices about the way that you are translating 3D information to 2D. Maybe you're the kind of painter that prefers site size color. And maybe I'm the kind of painter that prefers relational color. We can both create a really beautiful, believable, stunning painting of my window, and they have been interpreted in two completely different ways, right? That's what makes painting painting. That's what makes painting a human endeavor, are all these choices. And this is just one of 1,000 choices, right? You know, even this Velázquez painting, you know, this is lace, and he basically used a soft edge to show the lacy effect. He did not paint a single hole in this lace, but I guarantee you, if Ong had been painting this, he'd be painting each and every little hole, right? He was such an obsessive painter. And both are absolutely beautiful, but they're both very human choices that relate intrinsically to who that artist was as a human, as a person, as a visual interpreter of the world. painting is like your handwriting. It is completely unique to you. And my job as an educator is to give you as many tools, as many technical tools as I can. But the way that you implement them, like some of my students, I give them the equivalent of a hammer, right? And they're like, oh yeah, the hammer, it's the best. I love relational color. I'm going to use it everywhere. It's my favorite thing. Right. And then I give them the option for site size color. Right. And we'll call that the screwdriver. And they're like, oh, yeah, screwdrivers are the best. I would never use the hammer. Right. But the idea is that you'll never not have the tool that you need out of ignorance. Right. So my job as an educator, the reason I run an online atelier is that I believe in coming from a place of knowledge, really learning what has come before you, like learning the collective body of information that came before you so that you can truly innovate and move beyond it instead of reinventing the wheel alone in your studio, right? And I'm one of those people, I didn't find atelier training until I was in my late 20s. And I legitimately believed when I was self-taught, that I had invented some of these concepts. And then I get to an atelier and they tell me in one day what took me years to figure out on my own, right? It doesn't make any sense. This knowledge is available to you, and I strongly encourage you all to pursue it. Okay, I'm really on my high horse here. I have been missing, the chat is just going crazy, so I'm just gonna review here. Okay, if you look at the sky on a sunny day, it can be really dark, but if you paint it that way, it looks off. Site size versus relational. Exactly, Sarah. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. Okay, yes, I understand that if you're trying to aspire to realism, that maybe aspiring to something that looks photographic feels good, but you'll eventually outgrow that. Like once you get enough atelier skills, you'll see where the camera's limitations are. Just like we as painters have pigment limitations, cameras have their own limitations, right? They aren't capable of doing certain things, right? They can't bleed a color through the way that we can with painting, right? It also tends to polarize more. And of course, I am not anti-photography. I sometimes get accused of being anti-photography, and I just want to be very clear that I love photography. There's so much that you can do with it, and it's a beautiful medium. And those people who have studied that medium and work within its confines and found their voice in it, I think it's beautiful. I'm just saying that if you're going to paint, paint has different limitations than a camera, and paint has different advantages than a camera. So don't try to be a camera, be a painter. That's what I'm trying to say. Yes, I'm definitely into the human element, Cindy, for sure. And artistic interpretation, sometimes people feel like, sometimes I have students come into my class and tell me, oh, I want my own style, right? But you have your own style. It is inside you. And the style itself is when you learn all these technical aspects of painting, which ones you choose. Like, because some elements when you're in atelier training, you'll pick up right away and they just really resonate with you. And you're like, yeah, that, right? You'll just like really vibe with this one technique. And others like are really painful to learn, and you fight them and you fight them and you fight them and you finally conquer them. And then you're like, you know what, maybe this particular technique isn't something I want to include in my practice. But then there's this one painting 10 years down the road that you're trying to achieve a very specific visual effect with. And lo and behold, you need that one thing that you put aside 10 years ago, right? So, sometimes our paintings tell us what techniques they need, so, just like this pigment here, when we were trying to match it, it was telling us, not you, you're never going to match this color, right? Okay. All right. So I'm ranting a lot. So we talked about, we can't mix every color from red, yellow, blue, relational color versus site size color. We talked about how every color is both warm and cool. Those were my main color lies that I wanted to cover today. I do have, I put a couple notes here. So, oh, and then we talked about this idea of, all shadows are warm or all shadows are cool. No. People really cling to this, and then they're like forcing a color that doesn't make sense. And then they're like, why doesn't my painting look right? So I always encourage you, have processes, not rules. Okay. So a process for identifying a shadow color is, what's the value? It's a dark value. What's the chroma? It's actually a pretty chromatic dark. And what's the hue? It's a dark orange. Okay, that's a process that will get you to an answer that you can mix a color and put it down, right? When I mixed this color, I mixed an orange and then darkened it because I needed a dark value chromatic orange, orange being the hue, chromatic being like the level of intensity of the color. And I was able to mix this color. But if I had said in my head, oh, I'm using artificial light, that means all shadows are cold, right? If I start with a rule, how am I ever going to mix this color accurately, right? Because it breaks the rule. So have processes, not rules. Something that came up when I was streaming this morning was, are the eyes in the middle of the head? Well, that is only true, and let me see if I can do this. That's only true if I directly face you in the camera and I'm at your eye height, right? This guy's eyes are not in the middle of his head, right? Like, look at this, right? Because we have a view that's slightly low looking up at him. His head is at a slight angle. His eyes are not in the middle of the head. If you put his eyes in the middle of the head because you're following a rule, then you're not going to paint an accurate portrait. But if you have a process to follow, if you say, okay, my process is when the head is facing straight on, the eyes are approximately in the head, and that changes when the head tilts, and they get higher when it's tilted up or lower when it's tilted in another way, like look how low they are compared to the top of my head now, right? So have processes, not rules. The one that really was a thing in my online atelier recently was the width of a mouth, right? Like, okay, well, how wide is my mouth now, right? Right? Is it really in the center of my pupils, or let it out now, right? Or what if I'm looking to the side, right? My pupils are movable objects. They aren't like bony structures. Like the pupil of the eye is a terrible thing to relate anything else of the face to because they move, right? So relate things to your brow ridge or the cheekbones. That's a process, right? But a rule is saying, oh, the corner of the mouths are directly beneath the pupils. That's a lie. That's like a lie almost 99% of the time. Right? Some people have really wide mouths. Some people have really narrow mouths. The expression will change that. The direction the eyes are looking are going to change that. So be very, very careful about rules. I'm very anti-rules, very pro-process. Okay. All right. So, all right. I think that's enough ranting about that for today. I do have some really amazing things for you all today. Okay, again, I'm subbing for Eric. He's off on one of his art adventures, so I'll be here all week. We have a great lineup for you this week. I'm so excited. I love seeing what all the artists do in here. Okay, you can find more information about me on my YouTube channel at School of Atelier Arts. I also have a YouTube channel from way back called the 𝗖𝗵𝗀 Initiative that has some drawing content on it. I encourage you to check that out. If you're interested in the online atelier, please join us at the schoolofatelierarts.com, and you can see more of my artwork at Mandy Fine Artist. I have a gift for you. You can download the free video, 97 Incredible Art Secrets. So go to 97artsecrets.com/ASL to get your free gift. It's outstanding. I love it. And don't forget to sign up for Acrylic Live. Only a couple of weeks left, March 26th through 28th, 2025, with Essential Techniques Day on March 25th. 4 days of premium instruction in acrylic painting, and you can sign up at acryliclive.com/ASL. And of course, if you haven't signed up for the Plein Air Convention and Expo yet, you want to make sure to do that. PACE is on May 19th through 25th, and you definitely want to be there. So sign up at pleinairconvention.com/ASL. And everyone, don't forget to subscribe and like this channel at Art School Live on YouTube and at Eric Rhodes on Instagram. And speaking of Eric, where in the world is Eric Rhodes?
Hey there, it's Eric Rhodes. Where in the world am I? Well, I am aboard the Wonder of the Seas in Royal Caribbean. Right now we're in Cocoa Beach, Florida, and we are about to disembark from the port here and head out to sea and go to the southern Caribbean, down to Mexico, and then back. That's where I'm going to be for the week. So thanks for the vacation. Take care.
Oh, we're gonna miss you while you're away, Eric. Again, don't forget to make sure to like and follow this channel. If you enjoy my teaching style, I hope you'll consider joining us in my online atelier. You can learn more at schoolofatelierarts.com. And tomorrow we have a very special guest with Mary Garish, and I'm very excited to get to interview everything Mary tomorrow. So thank you all for being here. Have a pleasant art-filled day, and I will see you tomorrow.